Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome to All Things Superman, where we talk about everything related to Superman, from comics to TV shows to movies and much, much more. So today we begin our series with the review of the movie Superman 1, or Superman the movie as you may know it. Now the first thing we need to talk about with this movie is the casting, the perfect casting of this movie. First of all, Christopher Reeve as Superman, oh my God, Christopher Reeve has been the perfect embodiment of this character. Now, there are some debates going around online about who the best embodiment of a comic book character thus far has been, and a lot of people think it's Heath Ledger as the Joker, and Heath Ledger did a magnificent job as the Joker. But in my opinion, Christopher Reeve, the way he embodied Superman in this movie, has not been topped yet. It is his portrayal of Superman and giving us this character that we've never seen before on the big screen has set the stage for everything that Superman is now. And that's why these reviews are going to be really important, because you'll see how all of this goes into coming into the new Batman versus Superman movie. Now, Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, again, Gene Hackman at the time was a very, very recognized name, and they wanted to have some recognizable names in this movie, thus Gene Hackman and Marlon Brando as Jor-El. Now, Gene Hackman did a magnificent job again as Lex Luthor, which again is another character that set the stage for everything that we've seen in the movies thus far, even the new Man of Steel movie. And it's going to be really interesting to see how Jesse Eisenberg is going to play off what Gene Hackman did in this movie, and also Kevin Spacey in Superman Returns, but we'll get to that review. So yeah, Gene Hackman again was a very good choice for Lex Luthor. He proved to be a very formidable villain for Superman, and he gave us that on-screen chemistry where you could believe this kind of thing was happening between somebody such as himself and Superman. The three supervillains in this movie were magnificent, and you'll hear me talk a little bit more about them in the review of Superman 2, because that's where they played the larger part, but of course they had some scenes in Superman 1, most notably at the beginning, so again, a good choice of character. Now, one of the important concepts about this movie was the marketing ploy that they used to promote the movie. Now, they used the theme, "You'll believe a man can fly." Now, let me explain a little of that to you. Why that's important is because at the time we had not seen Superman on the big screen. Everybody knew Superman either from the original radio show or from the original George Reeves Superman TV show. And everybody knew how Superman flew then. I mean, it became kind of common knowledge that when Superman was going to, run and spring out of the window, and then they cut to a scene where they showed him flying up against a backdrop and then blowing some wind and stuff in his face to make it seem like he was flying. By the time 1978 came around, or 76 or so, when they started to conceptualize Superman the movie, that had already been commonly known. So this whole marketing ploy of "you'll believe a man can fly" was to implicate that they were going to do something totally, completely different than what we've seen Superman before. And again, that plays into an important part of what we know Superman to be. Now let's discuss a few of the important scenes in this movie. The first thing I want to talk about is the opening scene of the movie, the opening Krypton scene, where you see the camera panning down this big wide angle that's coming down on this big white planet, Krypton, and you'll see it white in the movie. Again, this was our first time seeing any kind of visual of Krypton on the big screen at all. I don't even think it had been showed in the TV show before this movie. So again, this was our first idea of what Krypton was, and this is our first time being able to see it. So I really appreciate what they did with how they opened the scene, and they gave us life as it was on Krypton. So we kind of had some back information on where Superman comes from. And again, that's important because you'll see how they did the exact same thing in Man of Steel. Man of Steel opened with a Krypton scene, except the Krypton scene on Man of Steel was opening with Laura actually birthing young Kal-El at the time. So, but again, it still gave us this picture of what life was like on Krypton, and it was this big scene. It was this big wide angle camera that's coming down on this huge planet. So it's like, wow, so we get to see Krypton for the first time, and we know where Superman comes from. Now, another important scene I want to talk about is the building of the Fortress of Solitude. Now, I think this is a really, really important scene to the scheme of the movie and what we know Superman to be. Now, for those who haven't seen the movie or don't really remember, what happened was Clark takes the green crystal out of his bag and he tosses it into the sea, in the Antarctic, and it actually builds the Fortress of Solitude. So again, we see these massive, what we think is ice crystals coming up out of the ground, and it builds this big, magnificent structure which becomes known as the Fortress of Solitude, which is where Superman kind of goes to be in solitude and, you know, kind of, I guess, kind of let off some steam. But I think it's really important because from this building of the Fortress of Solitude, every incarnation of a Fortress of Solitude, even in the cartoon, the TV shows, and all of this stuff have been a replica of that Fortress of Solitude. They all seem to replicate that in some kind of way. Even the one that, when the new Superman Returns came out, the Fortress of Solitude that was in that one was, again, a replica, of course, a redesigned, more modern Fortress of Solitude with more digital effects, but it was, again, a replica of this movie. So, again, this set the stage for how we were going to learn about Superman and how Superman was going to learn about himself. So we got a chance to see that in the movie, which I think was really important. It's going to be really interesting to see how they do this in the new Batman vs. Superman movie as well. Now, the Fortress of Solitude in Man of Steel was not really technically a Fortress of Solitude, but we're kind of comparing the ship to where he went to meet Jor-El for the first, where Clark goes to meet Jor-El for the first time, his dad, and he tells him who he is and all this kind of stuff. That can kind of be compared to the Fortress of Solitude, and it was in the Antarctic, so it was in a ship, so it was done a little bit different. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do that in the new Batman vs. Superman movie. The next scene that's really, really important in this movie was the most magnificent scene, I think, in the entire movie, and it's where we get to see Superman fly for the first time. If you remember, what's happening is he's had the conversation with his dad. 12 Earth years have passed by, and now he's Superman, and we see him in the costume for the very first time in the movie, and he takes flight. Now, this was so, you have to understand how really cool this was at the time, because this had not been done before. So Superman, of course, he lifts up, and he flies toward the camera, and then he's going out of the Fortress of Solitude, and he does this aerial flight where he flies out. And it's like, whoa, like, wow, like, man, this is cool. We had never seen Superman do that. Again, all of the Supermans that we had seen up until that point have been the George Reeves flying up against a backdrop where you could, you know, he's parallel to the ground like this, and you kind of knew what was going on. But Superman actually lifts up off the ground and, you know, flies toward the screen and then makes this aerial and goes out. It was really cool. So again, why this is important is because it set the tone for what Superman was going to be and how he was going to be as Superman in this movie. From seeing that, we knew that, oh my God, like, this is going to be something that's totally cool, something different than what we've seen before. Another scene is where we see Superman actually be introduced to the world for the first time. Now, what happens is this catastrophe in Lois Lane. She's on this helicopter, and the helicopter crashes on top of this building. So Superman comes out of the building, and I think they're actually on the Daily Planet. So the helicopter crashes on top of the Daily Planet, which is kind of cool. So here's the thing. What's cool about this shot, again, so we're used to seeing, again, in the George Reeves movie, that Superman, how he turns into Superman, he goes into a closet or the typical phone booth thing, and then they'll cut a scene where, you know, now he's out in the uniform, he's in the Superman costume. So what was cool about this is actually Superman actually kind of runs across the street, and it's really cool because he kind of pauses at a phone booth to kind of give that nod toward the canon of the movie, but he keeps going and then goes into these revolving doors, and these revolving doors spin, and then he becomes Superman like that. And it's like, wow, like, again, this is something that we've never seen on screen. We've never seen how he turns into Superman, and they showed that. So again, he takes off flying into the air, and all the news cameras and stuff out there, and they see it, and everybody's like, what is this? What's going on? And then he goes to save Lois. Now, again, this scene is very important to the whole structure of who Superman is. I mean, because he's already kind of I guess, kind of falling a little bit in strong like with Lois Lane as Clark Kent. So at this time, he feels he has to reveal himself to the world and save her, save the woman that he cares about. So again, it's really important that's going to help build the relationship between Superman and Lois Lane. It's actually their first time meeting for the first time. So that builds the dynamic between them. Now, a few other notable scenes in the movie are the scenes where I call what happens when the catastrophe happens, when Lex Luthor sets off the atom bombs and they go, of course, Superman flies one into outer space and saves Hackensack, New Jersey, and then the other one actually crashes in San Andreas, California. So what happens is this big earthquake. Now, the reason this scene is important because it shows, again, it stays true to the canon of Superman. So what happens is we see him do all the things we know him to do. The first scene that's notable in that is where he goes to become the railroad track. So during the earthquake, you'll see the railroad or the train that's on the tracks. The tracks are split and it's coming down this thing and it's trying to come to a stop and it's not going to make it in time. So Superman actually goes and flies under the thing and becomes a railroad track. And that's, again, a kind of a nod toward the canon of the movie, the whole more powerful than a locomotive thing. So that's kind of a nod toward the canon, again, in the movie. So in some of the other scenes where he is going to stop the water from flowing into the neighborhood and he pushes these big boulders down, these big gigantic boulders, again, that's a kind of a nod to Superman's strength. So we see him be powerful in this way in those scenes. So again, everything about this movie kind of stayed true to the canon and gave us everything that we've known Superman to be, plus much more. It gave us more of his character, more his idiosyncrasies, I guess, and things of that nature. So it was really important that they did this in the movie. All right, now I want to get into the deleted scenes of the movie. Now, if you're not familiar with the deleted scenes, you need to go out and rent the Blu-ray or the DVD, or just kind of search it on YouTube and you'll be able to pull up the deleted scenes of Superman the movie. But there are a few, but the most notable I want to discuss is the scenes where actually Superman goes down into the underground cave or house where Lex Luthor lives. So what happens in the movie, actually, Superman lands on the ground and then he spins around and goes down underground. So, and then from there, once he lands, the movie cuts to where Superman is coming to the door of where Lex Luthor lives, and he's pushing down this big iron door. So actually what happens in the deleted scenes, there are some scenes between the time Superman actually lands on that ground underground and before he gets to that door. So the first thing was what happens was he goes into this gun chamber. So as I guess something Lex Luthor built, and Superman is coming through it, and all of these guns start firing off at Superman, and all of the bullets are flying off his chest. Now, again, another nod to the canon of the movie, the whole more powerful than a locomotive and faster than a speeding bullet. So the whole bullet thing and bounce it off his chest, another canon of the movie. So that was a very important scene, but again, it got deleted from the movie. Now, after that scene, there's another one where after he walks through that gun chamber, he walks into this fire room. So there's these big torch blowers, these big fire blowers that blows fire on Superman. So again, and that was sort of a nod to the comic book because until that point, we had seen a lot of fighting and Superman, doing these things where there was fire involved and he's walking through fire. And we actually see that in Man of Steel too, to where when he's on that ship out in the ocean and he goes to save those people and he goes break down that door and he's on fire and his clothes is on fire. So again, just a nod toward the whole he can, withstand fire thing. Now, after that scene, and the final scene in that sequence was where the next chamber he goes into is this ice chamber. So there's these big vortex ice blower things that blow Superman, and he stands there like this looking around, and it actually freezes him, and you see this big ice cube on him, and then he breaks out of it and then keeps going. So again, just another nod toward his strength, how powerful Superman is, like there's really nothing that you could do to him and hurt him. Now again, it may sound a little cheesy now, but you have to understand at that time in 1978 when this movie came out, this was groundbreaking technology. Again, they were showing us stuff that we had never seen on screen before. So that's why these deleted scenes were important. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is the score of this movie, John Williams' score of this movie. Oh my God, what a magnificent score. Now, as a musician myself, as you can probably tell with all of the stuff in my background, music to movies is a very important thing to me. This score that John Williams created for this movie has withstood the test of time. It has this staying power that's like, it really, to me, hasn't been topped yet in a thematic way in a movie. Now, there are some beautiful scores to some other movies, but as far as scoring a superhero movie in this patriotic kind of way, it hasn't been topped, in my opinion. When you hear that theme, that it's like the song is actually singing Superman. You'll actually see, if you look it up, you can find Richard Donner, who was the director of the movie, talking about when he first went in to hear the score from John Williams when he went into the studio, and even he was blown away, like, oh my God, this theme is actually singing Superman, and he knew at that point that the score was right and that they were going to have to use it in the movies. And this is the same score that they've used all throughout all four Supermans, and even in Superman Returns. Of course, with Superman Returns, they did a few adjustments to it and did a few different things to it than the original score, which was a nice take on it. But again, it was the same in concept. It was the same score. So I talk a lot about this in one of my Man of Steel reviews about the music, because a lot of people were upset that we didn't have John Williams' score in the new Man of Steel movie. And my thought again was that we can't really use a theme like themes like that are not prevalent anymore in movies. You don't hear such out front themes like that anymore, and such straightforward themes like that that's building characters. It's more of a backdrop kind of theme now, to where the music kind of sits behind the characters and pushes them instead of being out front. So anyway, just the score to this movie again was magnificent. It hasn't been topped yet, and I'm hoping that even in the new Batman vs. Superman movie, that they give some kind of nod or something to the score of John Williams. Okay, so overall, Superman the movie, pretty much a perfect movie from start to finish. It was a movie that was way ahead of its time as far as technology and things like that are concerned, and they did something different. They gave us a different take on Superman. And this Superman the movie, it set the stage for what we know Superman to be now. It set the stage for even a lot of the stuff that's happening in the new Man of Steel universe, which is why these reviews are going to be important, because you'll see how all of this relates. And why some of the decisions that they made in Man of Steel, and even going into the new Batman vs. Superman, you'll see why some of those reasons or some of the decisions were made. So again, an overall perfect movie. It's still one of my favorite movies of today. One of my earliest memories as a child is sitting down and being just entranced in the Superman movies. So again, overall great movie. All right, guys, so I'll end the video here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel below. This is just the first review. I'm going through all of the Superman movies, giving an objective review, talking about how they relate to the new Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman universe, so you'll learn some new knowledge and get some fresh understanding on what's happening in the universe. So be sure to subscribe to the channel below. Hit the subscribe button. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at this link. And you can tweet me some of your responses, some of your questions. If you want me to talk about anything specific in the videos, let me know on Twitter. And until then, I'll see you guys in the next video.